Now, let's look at the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system. Now, the female reproductive system, we are going to look at the different parts of the female reproductive system and their functions. So first, let's look at the ovaries. The ovaries. Now, the ovaries is a part of the female reproductive system where what is produced? The eggs produced. So the egg is produced in the ovaries. Now, ovaries produce eggs, right? Egg is produced in the ovaries. If you don't call it egg, you call it what? Ova. Ova is plural, while ovum is singular. Now, we said there is a particular part of the ovary that the egg is produced. That part is called the what? Germinal what? Epithelium. That is the part that is produced, germinal epithelium. The follicle now is like a wrap around it. So if you look at the egg cell and the surrounding, that gives you the follicle, the Graafian follicle. So the Graafian follicle, the follicle is just like a sac containing the immature egg. Look at it that way. It's like a sac containing the immature egg. Now, so we've seen that ovary is where our eggs are produced. Did I say our eggs? Sorry. It's all their eggs, where their eggs are produced. Now, the oviduct or fallopian tube, I've told you before, anytime you hear duct in biology, duct means passage, tube. So the oviduct or fallopian tube is a link between the ovaries and the what? Uterus. How many ovaries do they have? They have 2 ovaries, right? One located, each of them located at the either side of the vertebral column, is it not? Good. Now, this oviduct, now, if they have the the ovaries like this, the oviduct or fallopian tube is that link between the ovary and the uterus or womb. So the fallopian tube links the ovary and the uterus together. Egg is produced here, right? Then if the egg is released during ovulation, we'll talk about the menstrual cycle shortly. If the egg is released during ovulation and it is fertilized by sperm, the fertilization takes place where? In the fallopian tube or oviduct. So fertilization takes place in the oviduct or fallopian tube. Then the uterus is a womb, right? So if the egg is fertilized, it is the uterus that the embryo now will be implanted into the walls of the uterus. That process whereby the uterus attaches to the wall of the uterus, that process is called what? Implantation. Implantation. Now, the particular position where the embryo now attached to the uterus, attached to the womb, as development goes on, that particular position will develop into the what? Placenta. So you see now the exchange of material. You see the link between the mother and the uterus and the developing baby is what? Is a placenta, right? So exchange of material is done between that placenta, is it not? Done through that placenta. Do we get that? You all know placenta, right? Because when they give birth to a baby, you don't used to see placenta used to be given up. Now, the vagina or the birth canal is where the baby passes, right? That's why it's called birth canal. Birth canal. So that's that. So eggs are produced here. The egg passes through the fallopian tube, going to the uterus, right? But on its way can be fertilized, right? And when it is fertilized, it will be implanted on the walls of the uterus, right? And it will be developing there in the uterus. Then during childbirth, it will pass through the birth canal of the vagina. Is it not? Now the cervix. We said the cervix is a what? Is a what? Is a ring, is a muzzle, ring-like muzzle that controls what? The opening and closing of the vagina. Now it's just like, now look at this, you are pregnant and nothing is closing it. You know, you're just walking on the road one day now. It just something is a muscular system is muscular ring structure is regulating the opening and the closing of the vagina, and that muscular structure is called the what? The cervix. Now the vulva refers to all the external parts of the female reproductive system, all the external parts, and is divided into the labia majora and the labia what? Minora. So that external surface you can see is a vulva. Now the clitoris is equivalent to the penis in a male. So this clitoris here is an erectile, I think I wrote it somewhere. It's an erectile structure that so if blood flows into it, it can actually be erected, and it is what gives during intercourse, during sexual intercourse. This is what is responsible for that erection of the female female genital organ still erect. This is that's why we said it is equivalent to the penis in the males. All right. So basically, in the male reproductive system, we saw 9 main parts. Here we are seeing how many? 7. But let me throw little light so that we can explain what is here little on the menstrual cycle. Yes. Now, let's just look a little into the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle have 4 phases, 4 steps, 4 stages in the menstrual cycle. And a cycle does not have a beginning, but let me start from the menstrual phase. Menstrual phase. The second phase is what? After the menstrual phase is what? Follicular phase. After the follicular phase, we have the ovulatory phase. And what? Corpus luteum phase. So these are the 4 stages of the menstrual cycle: menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and corpus luteum phase. Let me explain a little. You can write it, but let me explain a little. Now, as a lady, we said you have all the eggs you came with. You came with all the eggs you have, is it not? And the eggs are found where? In the ovaries, right? In the ovaries. Now these eggs, are they mature? They are not mature, they are immature eggs. And each of the immature eggs are growing in a substance we call the what? Follicle. Now, in follicular phase, I'm starting the explanation from follicular phase here. Follicular phase, a follicle is just like a sac, just like a covering, will be growing around an immature egg. Growing around an immature egg. So the immature egg, now the egg will be developing in that follicle. So look at the follicle like a covering, and the egg is inside, developing. Now, when the egg gets matured, the follicle will rupture, will break open, and the mature egg is released. Remember, the egg was found in the ovary, right? So this thing is taking place in the ovary. The egg, now the mature egg will be released, and 1 egg is released in a month, right? Now, the egg is released from the follicle. That process whereby the egg is released from the follicle is what? That is ovulation, right? Ovulation, that's ovulation, that's the ovulatory phase. Now, as the egg leaves the ovary, where is it heading to? Through the oviduct, right? It's passing through the oviduct or the fallopian tube. Then, if that person has sex around that period and sperm is released, the sperm will be swimming, right? And if the sperm hits the egg in that, remember we say fertilization takes place where? In the fallopian tube, right? Now, if the sperm hits the egg in that fallopian tube there, fertilization can take place, right? And remember, from the starting of this lesson, we said that fertilization, the nucleus of the male sperm is carrying it now, and nucleus of the female egg is carrying it now. We fuse together, right? Haploid to form a what? Diploid. Good. Now, if fertilization take place, the fertilized egg now will now be implanted in the walls of the uterus, right? In the uterus. Now, the corpus luteum. Okay, before I explain the corpus luteum phase, what if fertilization did not take place? If fertilization did not take place, now your womb is always preparing. The uterus is always preparing. What am I touching here? Sorry, the uterus is always my mic is on. See, is it on? All right. So if the womb is always preparing in case of pregnancy, so estrogen, progesterone will be produced in very high concentration to thicken the walls of the uterus, to thicken the walls of the womb, make it thick. So in case there is fertilization, there can be implantation. It can be thick enough, the womb can be thick enough to carry the developing baby. But if there is no implantation, if there is no fertilization, the walls of the uterus will now be shed as blood. That thickness of the womb will now be shed as blood. That is the menstrual flow you see every month. Menstruation. It's the walls of the uterus, walls of the womb that is actually being shed as blood. But now remember that egg ruptured, right? The follicle ruptures, right? Releasing the egg. That ruptured follicle is just like your normal egg breaking to release the chick. Now that egg now, that shell now, you visualize that way. The ruptured follicle is what will be turned into the substance we call the corpus luteum. We'll see the function of corpus luteum as we go on. But basically, this is like a summary of the menstrual cycle. So take note that egg here travels through the fallopian tube. Fertilization can take place here to the uterus. And basically, this pause and save.